You ever get that feeling, like that itch you want to upgrade your camera gear? Like, you see all these fancy things being announced, camera body, lenses, and all of a sudden your trusty setup feels, well, a little outdated.
I don't want to play with you anymore.
New shiny toys are pretty tempting, but hold up. Used gear, that's newer? Seems like a budget-friendly option, right?
Yeah.
Not quite. It can actually be a worse deal in the long run and cost you more. But let's unpack this whole new versus used gear and actually deep dive into it.
Okay, let's talk about it.
I remember the first time I actually upgraded my Nikon kit. I originated at Nikon D5500 and I moved on to the Z6. Now, yes, functionality on that D5500 was, well, let's just say it really wasn't built for YouTube domination. Now, the focus system on the Z6 was a game changer, and the ability to be able to use my old Nikon lenses with an adapter was pretty sweet. And hello, it's mirrorless, right? You got faster memory cards, deeper color correction, and dedicated video modes. So here's the thing. While using the adapter saved me a lot of cash up front, there were trade-offs. I basically had to relearn the system from scratch, and not all of my lenses worked perfectly as they did before, and most really needed an adapter. And to be quite honest, those fancy Z-mount lenses were way out of my budget at the time. Also, most of my lenses that I had were built for a crop sensor because the camera was a crop sensor. So all that full frame goodness that I should be getting from the Z6 wasn't as there when I needed it. And that's a bummer.
I'm bummed. You're a bummer. That's a bummer.
So why upgrade? There are plenty of legit reasons to upgrade. Gear gets old, gear breaks down, or honestly it just doesn't cut it anymore. You push it to its limits. Maybe you even need better quality. Maybe you need those new features, or maybe you value that long-term support that you get in the future with something that's new. Or maybe, just maybe, you're curious about the shiny new toy.
Ooh, shiny.
Before you empty your wallet though, you have to talk about the strategy of what you need really before you just go run off and purchase something.
Shut up and take my money.
Think about this as hack number 1. Prioritize your lenses. Now hear me out. Lenses are often the most versatile option for an upgrade than a camera body can ever be. They work across multiple different platforms or systems, whether you're going from a mirror to a mirrorless option. And a lot of them do have different adapters that you could use, so you could still use your lens even if you were to switch systems. You also find some really killer deals on lenses in the used market. In fact, for the one thing that holds value, the lens holds its value longer than a camera body. And when you look at a used lens, you can actually get some really serious steps in your quality and all that with the right lens. A great lens can honestly elevate your look tenfold, regardless of the camera body. But speaking of that, let's talk about hack number 2. Consider what I call a cost curve. Like a used car, let's look at the camera bodies. They can be a black hole for your cash. New models come out honestly all the time, more than we realize, and the resale value of your camera body can plummet very quickly or steeply rise. I mean, look at what happened with the pandemic. It just depends at the time of the year. And look, the latest and greatest is great if that's exactly what you need. You have to be aware of that financial roller coaster you're about to get set up on. In fact, some used cameras that normally would cost $200 to $300 in this market still range for about $500 to $600. And for maybe $100 more, you could buy a new body with a lot more advanced features. So you kind of have to start thinking about, when you're buying versus what you're buying, and even more longer term. But we're going to get into this. This actually leads into perfectly to my hack number 3, or my thought logic number 3. Camera bodies are all the same. Now, I know this seems kind of controversial, but the thing about camera bodies is the fact that a lot of the things inside are technically the same. From generation 1 to generation 2, not that much changes drastically. The core functions you get, photo mode and video mode, and some nowadays you get the ability to stream. Some other major differences go between like 1080p and 4K or even higher quality, but most of the time like the image quality is not going to change drastically, like I said, between version A versus version B. Almost like if you think about cell phones, a lot of times the iterations are pretty minute in the changes with a couple big things here and there. Like if you looked at like the Nikon Z6, perfect example. The Z6 came out, it was amazing. It was such a huge change from the mirrored lineup. But then you go from the Z6 to the Z6 II, same sensor, same processor, maybe dual card slot, not as much change. The focus system didn't really change as drastically versus when you got from the Z6 to the Z6 III. By the way, that's what I'm filming on right now. If you like this video, I'm actually recording on the Z6 III in N-Log. Leave a comment below if you notice the difference. So how do I know all this? Let's talk my personal, what I'll call war stories. I've bought a lot of new gear and I've also bought a lot of new gear. And I want to talk about the real life of it all. Like I said, I bought both new and used, and I want to tell you about that there's a learning curve on both sides. I've done my research, I've avoided impulse buys, I've compared costs, and honestly, it all adds up. But the biggest lesson that I've learned, don't get caught up in your short-term price tag. The long-term value and function, consider the limitations, and ask yourself if this gear will actually get used or is it just going to collect dust. Like, there have been plenty of times where I've bought gear to handle like a specific situation and I never needed it ever since. And now it just sits in my closet collecting dust in some camera bag that I haven't touched in like a year. And if you want to go to try to resell it, whether it's a body or gear or lenses, sometimes it's used and old enough that nobody wants it. I mean, there may be times where somebody wants everything, but it's just such extreme yin or yang. Not only that, you think you're buying something that's used that might still last you for a long time, but the thing is, you don't really know the shelf life of it all. Yes, someone could say how long they've used it, but you don't really know the quality. If you're a second user, the third user, has it been beaten up before, and it's just on its last legs? Those are things that you kind of have to start thinking about. These are the things that I've learned, unfortunately, through trial and error, and I hope that that lesson will help you not experience what I did, which was that short-term benefit that ended up becoming ultimately long-term loss. I did, like I said, through my experience, I found some options or some ways to kind of get around it. So before you actually hit purchase or buy or, add it to your cart, let's talk about options that you can do to potentially offset or have a more well-informed decision. Look, buying isn't the only game in town. Renting gear from local shops is the best way to let you test drive and actually use something before you commit. Third-party lenses are also a newer thing to hit the market, even more so these days because you can get an amazing lens at a fraction of the cost. And the cool thing is, like, these third-party lenses offer almost the same quality, if not maybe just slightly a little bit less. And I'm talking like the Sigmas, I'm talking about the Tamrons, I'm even talking about the Viltrogs and the TT Artisans of the world. All these third-party, even fourth-party brands are finally starting to come up that you could get a banger lens, like one like this, for honestly a tenth of the price. Lastly, look for non-sponsored videos if you can. There's a huge world out there and there's creators creating content with tips and tricks to find a perfect setup. I mean, you might be watching one right now. That was a bad wink. Why didn't I do this one? Why did I do the opposite side? So the verdict, new or used? Well, it does depend. I want you to make an informed decision. Think about your needs, your budget, and your creative vision. And don't be afraid to be creative in your upgrade journey. In my honest opinion, based on my experience, buying used gear can be very beneficial as long as you're thoroughly considering your options rather than just impulse buying. I'm talking about you, and I'm talking to myself too. We all suffer from gear acquisition syndrome. That's a whole thing. Maybe I'll do a video about that later. Now, let's hear from you. Have you ever bought used camera gear? What was your experience like? And or inverse, are you actually stuck in this upgrade limbo right now? Tell me everything. Type it up in the comments. Don't be afraid. You can tell me, it's okay. I'm here for you. Since you're here and you obviously are in the same journey that I'm at, why don't you hit that subscribe button? Yeah, I think you and I could talk about gear like this. We could also talk about our creative hacks and of course, a healthy dose of friendly banter, amongst friends. I mean, we're friends, right? Well, until next time, I appreciate you for coming by. If you want another good tip video, check out this one right here. Otherwise, keep shooting and I'll catch you guys later. Peace.